Welcome to the 7th tutorial in our series for trueSpace and the Illustrator, Introduction to 3D. In our last session we rendered some images from trueSpace using various layer options. Let's have a look at those layers now. Here sample 1 PSD represents the single layer image rendered from trueSpace. You can see our layer list has a single background image as well as the regular RGB channel information. So this is like any regular TGA or JPG image, it just has a single layer in it. Things get a little more interesting, however, when we open up the per feature image that we rendered in trueSpace. Now the image looks the same as the single layer image, but we can see that the layers are divided into the per feature layers which we selected in trueSpace at render time. Now we can edit those separately, such as making the layers invisible to turn off certain features. The final results change quite dramatically. We can also change the blend method. trueSpace chooses the blend method that gives an exact same final image as a single layer image, but we get to alter that. For instance, let's change how we blend the refraction layer, which lets us see through the glass. Vivid light gives a rich green effect, so let's tweak and save that. We can also change the opacity to control how much of that feature is mixed into the final image. By copying a layer, we can build upon the layer's effects. We get a lot of control over our final result with just a few mouse clicks. Now let's look at the per light image. Here each layer is the result of a single light in the trueSpace scene, and of course we can turn each light on and off by making the layer visible or invisible. Copying a layer increases the effect of that light. By changing the blending method and the opacity, we control full 3D lighting from an image right within Photoshop. We can of course copy layers from one image to another. So let's copy the key light from the per light image and move that over to the per feature image. This will allow us to increase the light in that image. And this gives us not only control over the features independently, but control over the 3D lighting all in the same image. So again, a little bit of experimentation and tweaking. We'll see you right into the finer aspects of that. The next picture was per geometry. Now one of the first things you'll notice here is that the transparency and reflection were not reproduced. This is a useful option in that we can hide our layers and see the geometry underneath. So this is great for use in making cutaways or exploded diagrams, or perhaps using alpha masks and transparency in the layers to reveal underlying construction of objects. Now this picture is also one where we stored some mask information. So along with the standard R, G, and B channel information, we'll notice that there was a addition of a whole slew of new channels. Now the alpha channel is white because no background was visible in the trueSpace scene. The ground plane is an object too, not the background. The depth mask is also white as there was no real variation in distance from the camera. The shadow channel stores the shadow information. We could copy this into a layer mask to add and control the shadows, for instance. The view normal channel is also here, as is the normal map, which is split into X, Y, and Z masks. So let's create a couple of common effects we might want to use. We want to use the view normal channel as a selection in another picture. This will control the refraction strength as refraction varies with view angle in the real world. We change to our per feature picture and select the refraction copy layer. Note that this only works on copied layers and not the originals from the render. Now we can use the load selection from the select menu, and we choose the per geometry picture, and we can pick from the channels in that image. We select the view normal and see the selection in the per feature image. We then make our selection into a layer mask with a click on Add Layer Mask. Now brightness and darkness is seen through the glass depending on the direction on the surface is facing. By editing that channel, we can now control the strength of the effect by adjusting the brightness and contrast, for example. Now we wish to do something similar for reflections, which also vary in strength depending on the angle you view them at. We first copy the reflection layer and hide the original. Then we add the selection mask in the same manner as before, copying from the per geometry image. We then invert the channel mask as reflection is brightest at the edges and adjust contrast and brightness settings. We have added some very sophisticated real-world effects to our render now. Let us make the highlights in the glass more prominent. To do this, we will copy the specular layer. Here you can see the highlights, and they are quite sharp. We can use the opacity and adjust the brightness of the highlights. Our shadows have hard edges, mainly because we used ray tracing to get the transparency effects. Now though, we can use Gaussian blur to soften them. Just select the shadow layer and adjust the blur to get the desired effect. So there are so many options here you can bring to your 2D experience and into the forefront to create many results quickly and easily. Now another effect we can easily add is depth of field, where parts of an image are blurred depending on how near or far they are from the camera eye. We use the depth mask for this. So to demonstrate, we use a simple example with spheres. This image was rendered in trueSpace with only depth mask. You can see the color of the mask depends on how far the sphere is away from the eye. Now to create the depth of field effect, we copy the background layer a couple of times and then add the depth mask as we did before with the view angle mask, by loading it as a selection and then creating a layer mask from it. Select the unmasked layer, apply a Gaussian blur filter. Now objects far away appear out of focus, and we can control the effect by moving the Gaussian blur slider. Now as another example, let's load up an illustration created using the perfume bottles and a simple background image. Now this was created only with the use of the per feature render, and by copying some layers and changing some of the blend mode and opacity settings. You will find this image in your course resource folder. So the possibilities are endless. We can only scratch the surface a little here in this course and give you a few ideas that you can use as starting points. Hopefully we'll fire up your imagination as to some of the effects you can achieve. And in the next two tutorials in the series, we'll take a look at even more ideas for using the layers and channels rendered from trueSpace. So let's move on to part 8 in the tutorial series.